Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video of the Arts of Moth. Today I'm going to be talking about the overall tier 5 heavy tanks. Because a lot of people have been asking me to do, another video. So I've decided to do another video. Now, the worst one I have to give to the Conqueror. The reason why, I think the Conqueror's tier 6. But anyway, I'm going to put it as, tier 5. This has to be one of the worst, if not the worst high tier heavy tanks in the game. It is such a lackluster tank. It's such a bad tank. It's possibly got one of the worst win rates in the game. And the reason why is because it just doesn't have the armor. It has no gun depression whatsoever. Oh, talking about that, I've just bounced off the turret of the enemy Conqueror. It also has a extremely sluggish reload for 120mm gun. I mean, the E100 with 128mm gun reloads quicker. Some might argue it's to do with the the bigger turret that makes the E100 reload quicker. Some may argue it's, maybe to do with German efficiency. But, the Conqueror is that tank that hasn't really been touched that often. And I really do apologise for the stuttering with the zoom. I have something wrong with my mouse wheel and it's just annoying me, so but overall the Conqueror is, for me, the worst high tier heavy. It's a terrible machine. It's absolutely terrible. It's got terrible armor. It's got a terrible gun. It's got absolutely atrocious shell velocity. It's a big old tank. It's got basically no side armor. It's just a bad machine, and I think that it just needs to be buffed. Really, it needs a turret buff. It needs a gun buff. Like, maybe get like a Conqueror, and then give it the L11A1. Just spice it up. Make the Conqueror. Make a the Conqueror 2, Conqueror Mark 2, which is basically this tank, but with the turret shielding and a new turret, and it has spaced armor on the upper front glaciers. But overall, this thing is just really, really bad. It's a bad machine. Now, what tier is it again? Tier 6. It is tier 6, okay. So, moving on to the next tank. I know a lot of you are going to hate me for this, but this is possibly the second worst tank in the game. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, it has probably one of the most ridiculously overpowered reload rates. It went from something like 1400 damage per minute to 2000 damage per minute, and it's got a insanely good reload time. Doesn't have the best armor in the world, which is a bit confusing to me. I mean, this thing just gets overmatched by everything. I still think that some of the medium tanks needs to be completely butchered or put up a tier, like put the left one up to tier 7 and make a separate matchmaking system. Maybe like very high tiers instead of high tiers, so that the tier 7s play alone and the tier 6s and 5s play high tier. But overall, I just think this is just not a very good tank. It's definitely better than the Conqueror by a far mile. It is so much better. But not. There are a lot of better high tier heavies out there, really. A lot of better high tier heavies. It's quite disappointing to see such a good, promising heavy tank just get, penned by a lot of things. The whole armor is atrocious, 200 millimeters, which means everything that is 201 or higher will overmatch the front of this tank. Now, the armor angling system doesn't work. I mean, it's been proven over and over and over again by multiple people. So many people have proven that the armor angling does not work. You cannot angle in these tanks. And because this tank is a big old box, like the Conqueror, means whatever angle you're at, you're going to get overmatched. You're just going to die. I mean, the one good thing is that you have a insanely good gun. And if people are stupid enough to shoot your gun mount, which, some people are, that's 300 millimeters backed up by 220. So that's 520 millimeters of tail armor. You do have one of the worst acceleration rates in the game. And you have one of the worst top speeds in the game. But you also have a pretty good penetration, 264. Which is relatively nice. So, overall, I would say this is the second worst heavy tank in the game. Give me a second. No, I'm not gonna see it's okay. I do apologize, I'm suffering from a cold, so moving on to the next heavy tank. I would have to go with this thing. The third worst high tier heavy tank. I don't know why this thing's a tier 5. Because yes, it can dish out its 3,200 DPM, in about like 5 billion years because it takes, was it 5-6 seconds between an interclip reload, which is way too long. It's simply too long for this tank. I mean, in War Thunder, it's only 3 or 4 seconds. In modern tanks, it's about 2.7 seconds. In Tankery, it's like an eternity. This tank also has absolutely no armor. Its armor has been butchered. It did used to have 200 millimeters of whole armor at the front, but that's now been nerfed to 130. And it used to have 110 millimeters of frontal turret armor. Now it only has 85. But its gun did get buffed. It used to have the same penetration as the ARL, which is an abysmal 240 millimeters. But now it's got 260, which means this thing will overmatch practically everything it sees. T-54s, Tiger 2s, E-50s. T-125 will be quite difficult if he's hold down. You won't be able to overmatch him as easily, but I think the biggest thing that kills this thing is that it's just so sluggish. This was designed as what was called as a fast assault tank. Basically a fast heavy tank. This thing had a speed of around 60 to 65 kilometers an hour, not 45. This thing can move. And I just think that because this thing is doing so badly, just replace it with the Lorraine 40T. Because the Lorraine is just a better machine overall. It's got the same gun. Yes, it has this, very, very bad armor. But it's the same gun. It's, it's got far better acceleration rate. And it's far quicker. But it's also a smaller profile. And it'll possibly have better TPM. I just think that the AMX 5100 is just such a terrible machine. Again, I put it as the third worst heavy tank at high tier. I do apologize. I'm suffering so badly from cold. It's just I've just drank some lemsip about half an hour ago. Right. Okay. It's just a lot of tingling in my nose. That's all. But overall, this thing, you could do well in it, but the reload of the clip is nearly a minute long. I think it's like 54 seconds long, which is stupidly long, and it really holds this thing back. If this thing had, say, a 40-second long reload for the clip, it would do pretty alright, but because it's got that 54-second long reload, of course that's with a stock crew, um, it really hurts this thing. It really, really, really hurts this thing. And I just think that a 54-second reload is just stupid. It is stupid. It's completely and utterly ridiculous. And because it's been nerfed for some bizarre reason, it's made this thing even worse. This thing is just performing so badly. I don't even touch it anymore. It's so bad. I would rather play the AOL 44 because that thing has a single shot. It may have the 90mm DCA 45 instead of the 100mm SA 47, but it has a very similar shell velocity. Of course, it has less penetration, but oh god. But I mean, it does have half the DPM, but that's because with the AMX 5100, I don't know where he's gotten 3,200 DPM from, because this thing can't do that amount of damage. I mean, if you want to do that amount of damage, you have to have brain dead enemies, because I mean, some people can argue saying, "Oh, you can do 3,000 damage, yeah, blah blah blah," but you have to be sniping because this thing has no armor, and it's just so big. It's such a big machine. Just if you got the MX 1375 or the MX 1390, just use those. They are far better. The reload on the MX 1390 is about 40 seconds, and you do have 200mm pen, but you can flank your enemies and you can slap them in the face with this 90mm gun. The AMX 5100 feels too sluggish, it's too big, it's just the reload's too long, the interclip reload's too long, it doesn't have enough health, it has atrocious armor, it is a bad tank. I mean, another good example is I can't believe I'm actually going to suggest this tank, but this tank is actually better, and it doesn't have a turret for some reason. Oh, there you go. The reason why it's better is because it's actually got a 105mm tank destroyer gun. Yeah, it's got a tank destroyer gun. I think it's actually the same gun that's off of the AMX 13105, which would make this thing incredibly devastating. I wish it had more penetration because this thing actually fires heat rounds in real life, so that would give it 250mm of pen. And the reload feels a bit sluggish, but this is one of those, original tanks in the game, which, when you think about it, it doesn't matter how bad it is, you're always gonna love it. So moving on to the next heavy tank, and I'm gonna move on to something that's gonna be, gonna really stab a few people in the face. T10. T10, I'll probably put as, it's either the IS3 or the T10. I think the T10 is better than the IS3, but not by a long shot. The T10 does do quite a bit more damage. I think it's 50 or 60 more damage per shot with that 122mm M62T2. But I don't know. It lacks in penetration and DPM. The speed is very good on it. It's a very mobile heavy tank. The armor is also pretty good, pretty bouncy, but it just feels too sluggish. It just feels the gun is too um. It's just so underwhelming. Such an underwhelming tank. The amount of times I've bounced off the most ridiculous parts of a tank, like for example, the tank we just talked about, the MX-5100, I bounced off its upper plate. Of course, it was angled at like 54 degrees or something like that, but 250 millimeters pen. This is a 122 millimeter round, which weighs a ton. Not literally a ton, but you know what I mean. It weighs a lot, and it skimmed off 130 millimeters of, you know, upper plate armor, which this should be able to overmatch easily. Now, I would say that this should at least have 275 millimeters of pen, or 270, because 250 feels a bit lackluster. I mean, when you have something like, say, of course, T125 is probably one of the most overpowered high tier heavy tanks in the game right now. And the reason why is because it's got a very good gun. It's got insanely good armor profile. It's fairly mobile. It's got a very good health pool. It's got alright DPM. It's just a good all-round tank. I mean, if you go hold down in this thing, they have a 45% chance, probably even a 35% chance of penning your cupola. They won't even be able to pen your turret. They would need at least 270 millimeters of pen just to pen your turret cheeks, and 260 millimeters of pen to pen your cupola. I don't know why this tank has 280 millimeters of pen. I have no idea. This thing should at least have 254, maybe even 260. 280 seems a bit excessive because this thing does not fire APFSDS, it does not fire APDS, it fires AP. And 280 millimeters of penetration is just extremely excessive. This thing should actually be considered a tank destroyer now, because you look at something, you click the trigger, and you overmatch them. It's that simple. I mean, even Tiger 2s just get smashed in the face by this thing. Um, so T125 is definitely um uh definitely one of the most overpowered um heavy tanks at high tier. Now, some of you can argue the M40A5 is more of a heavy tank than a medium. I don't think so. Um, because it doesn't have the armor. It has a mediocre gun. And when I say mediocre, it really is a mediocre gun. It doesn't feel like the tank you can go around um it just doesn't feel like the tank that everybody thought it would be. The M60, I would say, would probably be a better option. Um, because it will just be more mobile. Yes, it will have less armor, but it'll be a hell of a lot more mobile. I think it could do up to 60 kilometers an hour, which is incredibly quick for a tank of its size. Um, and it carries the same gun, but I think it fires a different round. I think it fires a first generation APFSDS round, um, which gives it a pen of about 290 millimeters, which would pull it up to tier 7. Now, I've already talked about tier 7 tanks, and I've already talked about some of the tier 7 tanks that could be added in. Uh, Now, we don't know if we'll see them or not, but I think tier 7 tanks will be a very good, place to be. But the M48A5 pattern, it's definitely lost its sparkle. It doesn't feel like the all-round tank anymore. I mean, the T125, yes, it's slower, but it's got a good gun, it's got trolley armor, it's got a very high health pool, it's got a pretty good DPM, it is fairly mobile, it's just better. The only thing that goes for the M48A5 pattern is a bit more DPM and a bit more speed. That's all. That's all. I mean, what else do you want? If you really want a main battle tank, just go for the T125. It's everything you want. Armor, gun, mobility, hit points. It's just it's just everything you want, really. I mean, before this thing was buffed, it was already in a pretty powerful position. And then Greg, for some reason, just like a lot of people asking for this thing to be remodeled because it was modeled wrong. Like the cupola was a lot smaller than what we previously thought. But he didn't remodel it. He didn't remodel it. He buffed it to extremes, and this thing kicks ass. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression. It's got really good armor. It's got decent mobility. It's got very good health pool. It's just a really good tank. Now, I could go and talk about the level 1, but we all know about the level 1. It's this broken glass cannon that, just annoys everybody. It's a super quick main battle tank, which, should really be tier 7. Because I just feel like this thing is just so unfair with its basically, you don't have to have any brain cells to play this tank. It's that simple. You look at something, you aim just a little bit above it, you pull the trigger, and you hit them. Every single time. This thing has one of the highest shell velocities in the game. It is... It's just a... Oh, I don't know. It's just a... It just kicks ass, really. Now, a tank that, I it wasn't one of my first tanks to get, but it was one of my first. It wasn't my first, but it was one of my first. The E50. The E50, I think this thing needs a little bit of love. The whole armor is already insanely good. I mean, if you angle this thing like that, good luck getting through that. You're not going to get through it. The turret is only 60 millimeters. Now, I'm sorry, I'm no tank expert, but I've looked at, what the actual armor of the E50 should have been, and it should have been 170 millimeters, not 60. And the gun as well. It is a 105, but it would have been a very good 105. And for tier 5, 1650 HP is pretty good. So the acceleration rate is, yeah, it's pretty good. The top speed is fantastic. This is basically a faster Tiger 2. Slightly less armored, unless you show your turret, of course. Um, but overall, this thing is basically a faster Tiger 2. I mean, it's basically got the same hull armor. If we actually look at the Tiger 2, the hull armor is 225, which I don't exactly understand why it's 225, because the hull armor was 160, if I'm correct, not 225. I mean, the Tiger 2. Let's just talk about the Tiger 2 for a second. The Tiger 2 is one of those tanks where, again, just like the T-125, it was overbuffed. This thing was buffed to extremes. You can, you know, literally angle your armor, not a lot, but you can angle it like, say, like this. And this 225 goes to extreme levels of armor. You're talking about probably 300 effective. Now I know that sounds stupid, but you know, I've had T125s where I've angled like this. They've shot my upper plate and they've bounced off. This thing is just, it's so goddamn ridiculous. I don't know why it's tier 4. It should be tier 5, really. Or maybe bring out the Tiger 10.5, put that at tier 5. Nerf this thing, but get the Tiger 10.5. Give the Tiger 10.5, I don't know, 235 millimeters of frontal hull armor, maybe 252 millimeters of frontal toe armor, but give it the 105 millimeter gun and put it at tier 5, and that will probably fix the problem. Why do you have a fast firing 88mm gun on one of the most broken heavy tanks in the game at tier 4? It makes no sense. Anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs down. Um, uh, what did I say? If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy this video, give it a thumbs down. Put in the comment section what high tier tank you think is the worst. In my opinion, the Conqueror is the worst, because it just has not had the proper buffs that it needs. And in my opinion, the most overpowered high tier heavy tank is the T125. The Tiger 2 is a mid-tier heavy tank, not a high tier. The only reason why I included it in this video is because it just steamrolls everything. It's an unfair tank, it's unbalanced, it should be nerfed, not to the ground, but it should be nerfed. I think the Tiger 10.5 CM would be a very good introduction with that 105mm gun. I just, you know, I just feel like, you know, the Tiger 2H is just a bit excessive in the armor, really. I think he's gotten these stats from Water Tank Splits. Because in Water Tank Splits, the Tiger 2, with the upgraded turret, has 225mm of hull armor, frontal hull armor, and 210mm of frontal turret armor. Now, I know that because I own it. And it is completely and utterly broken. It is completely and utterly unfair. I just think that he should have really taken the stats from Water Tanks, like the pre-buff Tiger 2 from Water Tanks when it had, you know, 185mm of frontal turret armor and 160mm of frontal hull armor. It would have made it balanced. It would have made it have armor, but not too much armor, but not too little armor. and it has a insanely, stupidly devastating gun. This is one of the best snipers in the game. It is possibly the second most broken heavy tank in the game, behind the T125, which is just flat out better. The T125 is just a ridiculous tank. If you've started out playing Tankery, I would recommend the T125 to be your first high tier tank. It's a good tank. It crushes everything. It's just a good machine. Anyway, guys, I hope that you are enjoying your Christmas. I certainly have. 2021 is just around the corner, and I hope that I can make more videos for you guys. So anyway, I'm gonna see you later. Goodbye.